Hey there, everybody, it's Mecha Draco coming to you with another episode of Observations of Society. And in today's episode, we're going to be discussing amorphous groups, specifically amorphous ideological groups. Now, the term amorphous ideological groups is not a specific term that I think I've heard a lot of people use. I've actually only heard the term used once or twice. And as far as I can tell through any kind of investigation, I don't actually see anything that has defined the actual term or use it as an official term. So I can't specifically say that the term amorphous ideological groups is actually an official term. However, it is a term I like to use to describe a variety of different groups. Now, what I will say is since we can sort of break down the word, it is a little bit easy to understand. Now, obviously, ideological groups, we already know effectively what those are. However, amorphous, on the other hand, is a little bit more of a less known word. So we can go into that first to try to describe what exactly an amorphous group is. Amorphous is basically just a term used to describe something that has no definite form. The exact definition saying that it having no definite form, shapeless, so on and so forth. Now, the second part of the definition also even says being without definite character or nature, or unclassifiable. Now, what that effectively means is that when you combine that with ideological groups, what exactly does that come up with? Now, what I've learned so far about the term is that it is an attempt to describe certain groups that exist in today's society that don't actually specifically have leadership. They don't have a set forth, I guess you could say, guidelines or other things like that actually represent, I guess, the group as a whole. No leadership that can be a role model as well as a representative for the group. They're the one, no leadership. At least this is how I like to look at these particular groups, as leaderless groups that effectively have no leader, no specific leader, no leadership in general that can, as I said, be used as a representative or as a role model, as well as someone who can help set forth the guidelines of what the group is supposed to follow. A lot of these ideologies actually exist in today's society, one example being something like Black Lives Matter. Now, this is in no way an attack on Black Lives Matter, and there's no even an attack on amorphous groups as a whole. I think that there are advantages to having an amorphous group because these types of things can in fact actually be rather advantageous to the group as a whole, especially in trying to grow the group, grow the ideology. There also, of course, comes some issues every once in a while, or at least I think there are some issues that come with it. Specifically, the biggest advantage, obviously, to an amorphous group is, as I said, the ability to have a free growth period, essentially. It allows the group to grow more freely. There's no set leaders, there's no set people that have to set forth guidelines and be representatives to spread their word. Anyone and everyone can spread the word effectively of the ideology as a whole on a whim. There's nothing that specifically makes them not be able to do that. The only major thing that exists with an amorphous group is because of the fact that it has to be an ideology in the long run, is that it has to have some kind of guideline, some sort of mission statement, essentially, that exists. Something like feminism, for example, that essentially has a guideline, a mission statement that is effectively just saying, hey, if you're for the rights of women, then you are a feminist, for example. And obviously, that's it's up to the individual to claim themselves as a part of an ideology. You don't just become a part of the ideology if you believe in something that they agree with. But the idea is that because of this fact, because of the fact that a person has to label themselves as a part of that ideology, because there is no set membership, there's no guidelines, there's no leaders or anything like that actually being put forth here for us to, for anyone who joins the group to have to follow, for them to have to listen to, or at the very least, just watch, because these individuals, as I said, can be great role models for the group, which they of course lack. Now, of course, going outside of the actual boundaries of the definition of an amorphous group, we will have to say that there are obviously leaders within some of these groups that can be classified as amorphous groups, such as Black Lives Matter or feminism. Obviously, of course, feminism has leaders. Obviously, Black Lives Matter has leaders. However, the idea here is that these individuals are usually leaders of smaller groups, smaller portions of the ideology as a whole. Now, the founders of Black Lives Matter themselves have even stated that they don't want any form of actual solid leadership or membership that exists within the ideology, because of the fact that they want the actual ideology, or they want the movement to grow as a whole, and they don't want that kind of restriction to be placed on the group. And I can understand that. I definitely certainly can, because that even makes sense. Once you start actually putting in the whole membership things, you have to start putting in the regulations. That's when you start having people who don't want to join because they have to deal with all that kind of stuff. However, it is understandable, or more specifically, it is realistic to understand that when doing these types of things, when making a group like this, we are going to be seeing some issues with this. Since we have no restriction on who can claim to be a part of the group, because there's no restriction on who can join, and so on and so forth, the ideology itself has a tendency to change, because there's no set forth guidelines, because there's only just basically a mission statement, effectively. People can take that as they want, and they can bend and shift it as to whatever they want it to mean to meet their own agendas, which is where a lot of the leadership that actually does exist within these groups comes in. They're individuals who have decided to take it upon themselves to claim what they think the ideology is supposed to mean. Since there is no set rule of what exactly the ideology is supposed to mean, it's just supposed to mean whatever they're supposed to mean, they take it upon themselves to become that leader, of that small section, to be the representative, or more specifically, to help guide the individuals that are under them to the right way of understanding the ideology. And I realize this is very realistic, very similar to religion, but I won't touch on that. Where this problem essentially arises, and where my biggest problem starts to arise with amorphous groups, is when you get things that happen like Black Lives Matter activists blocking off highway interstates, and basically blocking the major artery of a city because of their movement. And then, followed very closely, the individuals who are within the quote-unquote leadership of these groups, of that part of the group, can say, oh, well, we had nothing to do with it. When an individual goes after cops in the name of Black Lives Matter because he thinks that cops are racist, because that's all Black Lives Matter spouts, then they can just say, oh, he had nothing to do with us. It has nothing to do with us. It's not our fault he took it that way. It's not our fault he took the message that way. We didn't want him to go out and kill people. When people walk down the street yelling, "Pigs in a blanket, fry 'em like bacon," and the Black Lives Matter movement don't say that they have any connection to this, and yet everyone there was screaming Black Lives Matter and have every connection that they can think of to Black Lives Matter, the actual ideological leaders of these groups can go on mass media, can go on their Twitter accounts or whatever else and just go, "Oh, well, we didn't have anything to do with it." And it's not even just the leaders. It's the other part of the group. It's the other part of the ideology. It's the other part. They can all go, "Oh, well, we don't condone that. Oh, well, that's not what we are all about." Yeah, that's great that you're not about that. However, you have an entire section of people who have been hearing the same things that you are, and they took it this way. And you don't think that there's still a problem? You don't think that there's not a problem? And it's not just Black Lives Matter, it's feminists. Feminists do it all the time. When one feminist screams rape and it was found out to be fake, the rest of the feminists say, "Oh, well, she's not a real feminist." I realize that's a really bad example of that, but that's the point. The idea is that when one group screams out oppression, screams out racism, screams out sexism, screams out something that has to do with their ideology, the other part of the ideology can just go on to the media and be the face, quote unquote, face of that ideology and just go, "Oh, well, we have nothing to do with them. Oh, we didn't have anything to do with them at all. They don't have anything to do with us. They don't represent our belief." Now, don't get me wrong, most people nowadays can see through these lies. Most people can see through the fact that these individuals are screaming Black Lives Matter while they're killing cops. Basically, they can see that and say, "Oh, well, obviously they have connection to Black Lives Matter." It doesn't matter if they don't follow the ideology of Black Lives Matter Oregon. They're Black Lives Matter California. Some other bullshit like that. I don't know. In the long run, though, the concept here is that an amorphous group, though good on paper, though I can understand it on paper, in reality, in practice, doesn't work. Even the civil rights movement started out as a bit of an amorphous group. That was an amorphous ideology that existed that had no leaders to back behind it. No one to set an example. No one to look up to as a role model or to set forth guidelines of being what was a part of the civil rights movement. But then you had Martin Luther King come in and he totally took charge. Now, I don't know just how much he himself was in charge of the entire movement. I'm sure he probably didn't really even do all that much when it comes to the actual leadership role, of course. But his speeches, his face being out there, actually being out there, representing the actual group, being the individual out there going, "This is what it's all really about. And this is what we believe. And anyone who doesn't believe the same way isn't a part of our group." And they admit it, and he blatantly sets it forth. And everybody can agree with that. I don't know. Maybe it's the same thing, technically, with the way these work nowadays. But I don't know. Something about it, something about the disconnect nowadays that exists between these groups just doesn't feel like it's the same thing. I don't know. If you guys feel like you have an opinion on the subject, by all means let me know. I'd be happy to hear it. Correct me on anything that you would like to correct me on. I'm sure I got plenty wrong. I'm planning on coming out with some more videos. Again, I really apologize. I do want to apologize for how long it took me to get this video out. I've been sick left and right. Work's been hell. Had a vacation that just sort of popped up out of nowhere. Lots of excuses. Not really an actual reason to not do the work, but it's why it didn't happen. But anyways, guys, I certainly hope you enjoyed the video. And don't forget, guys, good luck out there. Don't forget to have fun.